And that's why Clinton Huey and Noel Chun are here today. This is part of their healing journey as well. Turn it over to you.
I'm Clinton. I'm definitely very nervous because I don't know all of you. I know some of you. I originally wrote this in 2006, I think. And I titled it Silence and Breaking Silence. But it's about sharing stories, because it's the telling of the stories that heals us. It's that telling a story is opening up a side of myself that others don't see. It's revealing. So I grew up in a large family. There were 9 kids. My dad was an immigrant from China back in 1928, and he came over as a paper son. He used a false name and a false identity that he had to hide. So we never knew about this growing up. I had no idea that he even became clean like in the 1960s, but I never knew that. He ran a laundry, he worked late, came home at 10 o'clock. We had a grocery store. He was always stocking shelves or doing paperwork until really late. So he rarely talked to me. We lived right above the grocery store, but we never saw Dad, even though we were in the same building. I remember going to Cub Scout meetings on Friday nights and trying to get an award, and he said, "Oh, I'll make it there, I'll make it there," and he never showed up, not once. And I had my friend's mom would stand behind me, and she had to receive the award for me. We never talked about feelings, of course, because we never talked, and he probably didn't have the vocabulary. It's not something that he grew up with. He was kind of abandoned by his own parents, who kind of sold him during a time of poverty in China. So he became an adopted only son. I think one of his brothers really died on the road from starvation. So often in the store we had to protect, as kids, I was 11 years old when we started the grocery store, and there were gangs of kids that would come in, and sometimes my dad would be out doing a pickup of supplies or produce or something, and it'd just be myself, my 12-year-old brother, and my 14-year-old sister alone in the store, and we'd have to protect stuff. And then there were other times where, my dad was in the store and he said, go out and sweep the sidewalk. And I'd get surrounded by a gang of kids and then harassed and pushed around, and I'd come in and I never felt like I could yell, "Dad, I'm being attacked." I couldn't do that. It's like I felt like I had to stand up for myself. And I would go into the store, teary-eyed, and I didn't get any comfort from my dad. And so I had to go elsewhere to get my affirmations out of my own family. And in the junior and high school, I heard about this Cameron House youth program that had this amazing active, there were like 500 kids on a Friday night who'd come to this community center. And then I decided I'd check it out. And I felt myself so alive. Here was this director, Reverend Dick Whitman, who was so charismatic. He was this really like shaped like a bear, and he'd lead us in day camp songs, and he'd be really lively, and he'd, direct the song about the orchestra, and get each section to make their sounds and do all that. And it was amazing, and he inspired all these youth to eventually go into community work. They started all these community organizations in San Francisco, Chinatown. Came from a church. He encouraged, and he got over 20 people to go to seminary, join church, and it was so wonderful to have this physical warmth that I didn't get from my own family. And other, guys in my club, I was in a co-ed club by then, but guys in my club, they kind of, chuckled about when he would give us bear hugs or whisper rubs, And I wasn't afraid, I kind of embraced it because I was so starved for affection, And I felt so alive. Here I felt I had a chance to refashion myself from this really shy, academic focused, geek or nerd or whatever, to somebody who could suddenly have relationships with more people and girls in the club. So one of the things we did was we often went to the church's cabin, which is right on the border of Muir Woods, National Park now. But it was an amazing retreat. And sometimes we'd go up on a Friday night after club, just the guys together. And I felt so close to God's handiwork when I was there. It was just so peaceful because I grew up in an urban jungle. And in 1971, I was already had a couple of years of college, and I felt really privileged to be asked to be the carnival chairperson for our Cameron House Community Carnival that raised money for our day camps. And after it was all over, my friend who was my youth director, I was a club leader, but he was a director, but just third and fourth grade department, and he said, "Hey, Clint, you want to come up to the cabin with me and Dick, I said, "Wow, what an opportunity to have this alone time with, two special people. Someone, who was a little closer in age, and then to go there with Dick. Usually when I went there, it was with a whole, group of 20, 30 people, So I said, yeah, I'll join you. So, we went over there, and, we helped plant some of the plants that didn't get sold at the carnival, and then we had dinner, and we talked about theological matters, and sat by the fire, and it was like something I never experienced in my own family, And then, we got ready for bed, and Dick asked, who wants to join me? And, my radar kind of, we both said, oh, that's okay, Dick. We've already set up in the side room over here, So my friend was so relieved. So still, I wonder what it would be like to take up this offer, because I was, growing into myself, exploring my own self, and that's both sexual and non-sexual. So 4 years later, I was already out of college. I was 23 years old. I didn't have a job, and so I was asked to be carnival chair a second time. And I took it up, and afterwards I said, oh God, I remember that time 4 years ago. I went up to the cabin. That was really cool. I wonder if you'll go again. So I, had the gumption to ask him, hey, Dick, you going up to the cabin? He said, yeah. He said, and so, hey, can I join you? And he said, yeah, sure. And so I, threw my stuff into his van, and this time it was just me and Dick. So we took a nice leisurely walk. We talked about important matters. I had no idea what
talked about, but we got ready to bunk again, and Dick said, "You could join me." And I said, "Why not? I'm a liberated male, you know. I've hugged guys before. Here was a chance to stretch just a little more." So, and I felt awkward, you know. I had my sweats on because it was cold out in the woods, and I told myself it's going to be okay because I trusted Dick totally, you know. And then Dick pulled me, this big bear pulled me up against him close, and he said, "Okay, this is one of just his hugs." And then it kept on, and I said, "Oh, this doesn't quite feel right." And I felt my throat and my chest muscles tightened, and I started to go inside myself, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings still, you know. But it didn't feel right, and I just said, I pushed him away and said, "This doesn't feel right, Dick." I was amazed that I was able to do that. He said, I thought you wanted to join me in bed." And I said, "Not this way." I was strong enough to say no, but not assertive enough to get the hell out of there, you know? Because I still didn't want to make Dick feel rejected. You know, that's how much I respected and cherished him. You know, yeah. And so I don't think I slept that night. You know, I woke up in the morning, daylight came, and I lay a foot away from him, and my thoughts were running rampant. I felt I had lost such a precious gift, that of unconditional love, what we call agape. I didn't understand. I had trusted Dick for so many years. I idolized him for the gifts he had bestowed upon the youth in our community. He was a model of selfless giving. But how could he do this? I had to ask. So when he awoke, I got the nerve to ask him, why did you need this kind of affection, Dick? And he said, these words just stay in my head since then, 47 years ago. I give so much of myself to the community. I need to get something back. And I thought, man, this is sick. This is sick. And my relationship with Dick could never be the same again. I continued to, kind of be involved with Cameron House in the church. And it goes off, but I had a hard time blocking out this image of Dick. I treasured what he did so much. At the same time, I felt this huge sense of betrayal. And I couldn't speak to anyone about it. It's like, who the hell I talked to about this? I didn't want to bring it up to anybody in Cameron House staff, or the public, because I didn't want to jeopardize the reputation of Cameron House as this innovative social service agency in the community. I didn't want to stop all the good that was happening from this community organization. So years passed, 10 years passed. I got married, I raised a daughter. We struggled during different aspects of my marriage. There were good times and there were fights. I found myself repeating a pattern. When things got tough to resolve, when criticism developed in anger, we would reach a point where, to stop the escalation, I became silent. And I would withdraw within my chest and throat. That's the only places that always noticed would become tight. I was not able to feel what I was feeling. We kept trying to work this out, my first wife and myself, over and over in counseling, but never got very far. And when the story of Dick Wickman's abuse broke out in the San Francisco Chronicle, here's a nationally known paper, 1989. This is 14 years after my abuse. I was shocked. I couldn't believe there were
so many, like they're guessing hundreds of
victims,
but I said, I'm not alone. I'm not alone.
and yet I was still alone because I had no names. No names. Who do I talk to? I had no idea he was one of them. And I've known Noel, since I was, like early college, I guess. Yeah, we were in the same agape fellowship.
So I didn't feel like there was any staff of Cameron House or any clergy, any of our pastors that I could go up to. But my wife at the time said, "You got to go talk to Dick. You got to confront the perpetrator because your nephews are often in close contact with him because your brother-in-law lived with him after his parents were killed in a plane crash. He lived with him like family. You got to protect your nephews." So it took over a year before I could arrange to see him, to go up and confront him. And I did. He had moved out of the city down in the peninsula, and he said he'd be glad to see me, and we spent the whole day. I was out on the porch. His wife was at home, so we spent the time out on the front porch, just talking for 3 hours, and it was really slowed and strained speech. I had to check in with where my body was. So I recounted to him, because this is 14 years ago, the time I visited the cabin. And while I was doing that, again, I felt my throat, my chest tighten. I let Dick know how I felt back then. I told him about my father and about the distance that always existed in my relationship with my father. I told him how much his warmth affirmed who I was, that it gave me what I so needed at that time. I told him how much I had trusted in him. And then I told Dick how what he did broke my trust, how sad it made me feel about the church. My mixed feelings were right there at the surface. I was appreciative of his good words, and at the same time I felt angry, betrayed. A part of me still wanted to protect him at that point, I didn't want to hurt his feelings. And another part of me wanted him to see the pain and torture he caused in me. Surprisingly, Dick had no quick responses. He said he was sorry for the pain he caused me so quickly. And then he pulled off from the shelf one of these pewter, which made out of tin, plates that he had cast, and he would give out to his favorite people, in his office at Cameron House. You'd open this door and there'd be 2 walls full of photos of all his favorite photos. And I noticed they're all guys, very few women in there. But I always felt special because my picture was right there with them. So he cast like 100 of these plates, and he had St. Francis on it, and he was going to pass these out. And I told him I couldn't accept the gift at this time. I said, hey, that'd be a cool thing to have, but I couldn't take it. It was like a buyout. It didn't feel right. And I told him that I couldn't take it at this time. I was healing. I was getting stronger. I was standing up for myself, and I never visited again. And later on, when I heard or read about Dick's response to public revealing of his abuse, he said, and then none of his accusers had ever come forth and spoken to him. And I just felt betrayed again, like he made so little of all it took for me to go and face it. it wasn't until 25 years after that abuse that my new pastor said, there's too many skeletons in our closet. We're going to have a Lenten series, and we're going to invite anybody who has anything to talk about this unspoken abuse in our church. And there in the church room, I shared my story for the first time with other people in my church, but there were no other direct survivors right there. I still had nobody who I can really talk to, who I can identify with. And then 3 years later, I was invited to a gathering of survivors for dinner, and I was there. I got to see, hey, Noel's here. Oh my God, he's one too. And there were other people who were friends of mine, and then there were people who were, 15 years older than me, and 20 years older than me. So, man, there's a wide range of ages here. So, we developed this monthly group. We met at Noel's house, middle of the week, once a month. And then one of my friends who wasn't part of the group, he said, Clint, we'd really like to get you to write your story. And it took me hours. I think I stayed up till like 3 or 4 in the morning because I had to capture the feelings that were in it, because that's what was important to me. And then the spring of 2005, 90 people gathered for the first of 5 community healing workshops at Cameron House. Close to 100 people. And there was a panel, and people from my monthly group were up there at the front, and a couple of people from the Cameron House Healing Task Force that had formed, I don't know, maybe around 2002 or so, to help facilitate this process. And they were up on front like we were, and they each told their personal stories. It was so moving. There was so much heaviness in the air from hearing people you love and work side by side with. Never had any idea that these people had carried this burden for so long. And there were leaders in the church, and leaders in the organization there. And it was so moving. So we continue to meet, but on these Wednesday nights, we had a really hard time getting down to the feeling level. Because, if I broke down on a middle of the week and had to work the next day, would I have anybody to pick me up, but to do that? So we needed a retreat. And so we had one. And that's what Satsuki and my friend Benjamin were the facilitators at this retreat center that she had used for survivors of the camps. It was just an amazing place. And so there were 9 of us, and from Friday evening till Sunday afternoon, we would become like family. There were people I had known in my own church community for 35 years. I had worked alongside them in carnivals, day camps, mission trips to Alaska, church committees. And now we were going to see if we could air our laundry, show our shit, take the risk of sharing our deepest pain, stuff that we can talk with our own spouses, definitely not with my parents. It was a lot to ask for, but we were in good hands, and they were just amazing facilitators. I remember hearing Satsuki the first time at a community workshop, and it was just kind of, it was academic talk, But here was a whole different side of Satsuki. She drew us out, and she made it safe for us each of us to tell our stories. And I remember the session on the day we were going to get ready to leave. Satsuki had us do an exercise. She said, I want you to close your eyes and visualize that you're in an old house with many rooms. She told us to go into one with a closed door. In that room, we were to visit a child. She said, I want you to see the face of the child you were. Now hold that child's hand, look into his or her eyes, and thank that child for carrying a burden that he or she was never meant to carry. Thank you for protecting you, for standing up for you when there wasn't an adult to do it. And I couldn't hold it together any longer. Tears started streaming. I started to sob. My whole body shook. And I became that child. You see, when I was 11 years old, I had very traumatic episodes working in that grocery store, and there was no one to comfort me. And as I shook, my friend Tom said, why don't you lie on the carpet, Glenn? And Benjamin, remembering that my Chinese name meant scholar in the woods, had the group gathered around me as I was lying on the carpet. And he had me say the words, I need help. He joined me in saying it louder and louder, I need help. And then he had the group respond, we can help, over and over. I was reliving one of my scariest memories of feeling powerless. And this time I would experience a different outcome, a different set of feelings. You see, I believe that when we experience trauma, our bodies remember it. My hurts, my traumas are stored in my nerves and my muscles, and that's why, when I was trying to write notes earlier when she was writing, my hand was shaking like that. I got all this adrenaline returning, comes to the surface when I tell this story. And these things that our body holds they're like armor to protect us, from when the time of the trauma. But then later when the trauma's not there, we still hold them in our body. And they only come up as a button that gets pushed when someone says something, with a certain tone, and it triggers a memory. I'm not even aware of what the connection is, but when I get tight, So the group is helping me to heal. And I was gaining back my voice. And because the retreat was so powerful, some of us wanted a couples retreat. Our partners are often the secondary victims, and our kids. So parts of the dynamics in my relationships develop from the way I still react to situations that remind me of the pastor. Again, at that retreat, Satsuki and Benjamin did their magic, carefully selecting exercises, enabling each couple to work through and clarify their issues or patterns of relating. So in 2006, my journey was only beginning. This is 16 years ago. And over the past 15 years, I've raised a son. He's 15 now. And each time I lose my patience or get angry with him, I realize I have a chance to rewrite the script and apologize, to remember myself as a child. And so I cried with my son. And heal our relationship. And in the process, I get to heal the wounded child.
I'd like you to really take in the various elements of Clinton's story. But one thing I wanted to say is I think his story is helpful because people often think that abuse is like violent rape. But through Clinton's story, what you heard was the trauma that had to do with the loss of connection, the betrayal, the loss of trust, his faith, how it triggered his childhood losses, and that the forced intimacy was just another loss for him. So when you are, if you are one of the people that are going to be doing workshops and encouraging people to share, one thing you never want to do is to minimize the nature of the abuse. And sometimes abuse, especially by someone who has the power of word, like a spiritual leader, the ramifications of that are much deeper and broader than someone, than something that you might have characteristically thought was clergy abuse. Okay. I'm going to turn this over to Noel.
I'm Noel. I'm a survivor of clergy sexual abuse. It happened over 50 years ago. I want to say what a privilege it is to be here today, to share your perspectives and share your stories with me. It is a continuation of my own healing, and I'm here to give you my support in your healing. About 10 years ago, as we were in the middle of our own healing process, I wrote 2 poems about the 2 traumas I experienced. One of being the pain that we held together as survivors, and the process that we were going through. And then I wrote another poem about community trauma. So I'd like to read those to you first. The first one is about our trauma as survivors. It's called Stepping Out of Our Darkness into Our Light. Our process started with the community meetings, actually before the community meetings, but this poem starts, as Clinton noted, that there were 5 community meetings that was a part of our healing process. Stepping out of our darkness into our light. We have traveled many moons together. In a holy sanctuary we gather, shaking in angst and fear and hope. We step ahead into the unknown. Light, time, truth, freedom. It's our moment. Stepping ahead into the light, we opened our hearts to minds finally opened. In anger, with tears, we shared our pain, our sorrows. we released our stories from their hiding places so that truth could be heard. We shared our tears so the truth might be heard. We opened our souls so open hearts might listen and hear, and the truth could be heard. Common will brings us together again. Near the sea, it's a place for healing. We listen to the silence of the stars and the sound of the ocean and the wind. We are consoled by the dark night sky and millions of twinkling stars. Our hope is to continue our journey, stepping out of our darkness into our light. An angel nourishes us with veggies and haiku. Our spirit healer helps us heal our souls. Karma has brought her to us through winds and clouds on rays of the sun. With her open hands, she helps us step out of our darkness to find our light. 24 hands with fingers digging deep pry open the doors that have imprisoned our pain. Heavy doors with rusted hinges resisted being opened. As one, we break open the seals to our darkness and let in the light. The cords for community grows. The ocean brings calm in a sea of turmoil. We learn of each other's pain, and we listen to the tears falling in our hearts. Wretched anger, tears of pain, tears of sorrow, falling on our scars to open old wounds. And we release our demons imprisoned in our souls, our spirits freed. We step out of our darkness into our light. The effigy we mold is an image of our pain. Laughter rings as we give shape to our demon. Then silence as we feel the tears falling quietly in our hearts. We are going to the ocean to burn our demon and free our spirit. It is a long, cold walk. The wind shows us as the sun is setting. There is silence as the demon warms us, as it burns with the notes we've written to bring us out of our darkness into our light. We have traveled many moons together, shaking in angst and fear and hope. We step ahead into the unknown, stepping out of our darkness into our light. As the community meetings progressed, I became aware of how my former community had suffered its own trauma from the silence of this open secret that had really separated the community and those who believed and who didn't believe. So this next poem talks about the experience of the trauma and healing of the community. It's called In the Light. We have traveled for many years with a truth unspoken. We would gather in sanctuary divided by walls of silence. unknowingly paralyzed by our fears. Then the angels came and brought light into our shadows, and our fears released us. And with new eyes and minds unfrozen, we saw our wounds hiding behind our fears and pain. And our community divided by silence, in silence, with silence. Walls of silence with truth unspoken. Walls of silence with justice not given. Walls of silence with our community broken. We're afraid of losing our stories. We're afraid to speak our stories. Afraid, blinded, paralyzed. Then the angels brought calm to us with the loving kindness of healing and reconciliation. And as a community divided for so many years, we embraced truth and forgiveness, healing and reconciliation. We have traveled for many years, the truth now spoken, and no longer living in fear. We can choose to be in the light. We can be the light. Thank you. About 2.5 months ago, when Satsuki and I were talking about coming up here, at first I said yes, right away. And then I realized I don't have a passport. At least I only have an expired passport. So I went home and immediately got on the internet and to the U.S. passport agency and was able to get a fast-track passport and able to come here. It's been a long journey for myself. It's been over 50 years since my abuse happened, my first trauma. In the late 60s. And the second trauma happened in 1987 as my former congregation had a meeting concerning the sexual abuse allegations concerning Reverend Dick Wickman. During that meeting, I stood up and said I was a victim. And my whole world turned upside down after that. It took another 15 years before Cameron House and the Presbyterian Church in Chinatown started the healing process and began to publicly deal with this open secret. It's been a very painful and healing experience. It is why I'm able to sit here with you and share my experience and give you support as you move through your own healing process. It's been about 15 years since I was on a edge of a precipice, close to an emotional breakdown. I was, I had, I struggled with suicidal thoughts every day. It was through 10 years of intense therapy and hard work to get to where I feel I'm in a healthy place today. I know that in spite of the ups and downs and the intense emotions that come forward as I share with you, that it is both important for myself to speak publicly as others cannot, that the truth must be spoken to bring about justice and about bringing about healing for not only for individuals but for my and your communities. There cannot be healing and reconciliation without the truth being spoken and acknowledged. I really want to focus on the trauma of community. It was as painful as the sexual abuse trauma. I lost my religious community by speaking out. I can still feel the pain of losing a community that I had grown up in and trusted. And as you move forward, part of your challenges is that you have communities across your whole nation to have to try to reach out to. And I hope that I can be supportive of that process. As I wrote in my poem, you know, we without realizing it, are frozen by our fears and our pain. But it takes acknowledging that and speaking out about it that will help you and help my own community move forward. In my own experience, as we move through our community meetings, people who had close relationships with Dick Whitman and who had been long-time deniers of the abuse were eventually able to come up to me and say, "I'm sorry for not believing you." As I've listened to you this morning, it's so important that individual stories are shared, And each of those stories are important in this process of healing. Not only from survivors, but also all of those who have been affected by this trauma. And it's so very difficult to acknowledge and see how the trauma plays out in communities. And as you reach out to survivors and secondary victims, I've learned from my own experience how important it is to listen, but not only to listen, but to hear what's being told, and actually what's not being said. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Clinton. So let's just take a deep breath. I'm going to give you a chance to comment, ask a question. We learned during the time that we were doing this work that when the feelings come up, that we reach out and put our hands on each other's back, not as an effort to get them to stop crying, stop feeling, to be able to say that I'm with you. So that singularly painful loneliness is disrupted, and there is a feeling that someone is listening and someone cares. So this afternoon, as some feelings may come up for you, but you'll reach over and not want to stop the person from being able to express, but to let them know that you're hearing what they have to say. Okay, so if you have comments, we'd like to give you some time to do that and respond.
I just want to first thank you, Clinton and Noel, for sharing your stories. As a young person myself, we're always taught to, like Dr. Ina said, to listen to our elders, but I think as a young person, we usually don't. But hearing your stories today about the trauma that you've carried for these years is inspiring. So coming here to this workshop, I actually live in Toronto, so I flew out here, but I kind of had, one of the main takeaways I wanted was to kind of be able to organize these intergenerational dialogues around trauma. I currently, in terms of community work, I currently sit on the Young Leaders Committee of the NEJC, and one of my passions is having these sit-downs with our elders, just so we can bridge that gap between us. My question is for Clinton and Noel. In terms of your past experiences with this trauma, how was it, or if you had any experiences sharing it with younger generations? I know, Clinton, you mentioned your relationship with your son, and I was just curious maybe if you feel comfortable to share, if you're able to share that past with him and maybe navigating being a parent with you.
haven't shared with my 15-year-old yet. I have shared with my daughter, who's 37 now, but I think I shared it with her maybe as much as 7 or 8 years ago. But he sees she reads something so personal and then write little comments and get it back. It's such a validation of, wow, there can be somebody out there, there can be an adult out there who feels it's important to know about my growth, you know, my goals, who I wanted to be, who I was inside, you know. So that changed a lot for me. Someone who believed in me. So, as in regard to how to get more people involved in it, I think, yeah. I mean, when I wrote my account, I sent it out to, like 20 people at my high school club, Cameron House Club, and hoping that it would trigger some conversation, when they did the final report with all their stories, the Healing Task Force decided they wanted to keep everybody's name out of it to protect it. But I said, hey, what's going to affect me is if I know the name of somebody real, but they didn't want to put my name in it. So it wasn't until the second healing workshop that I was on stage and had to talk, and then that people could connect the story with who I was. And then when it came out in Alto magazine a couple of years ago, her names were right in there. Everything was out front. And some people reached out, but I had conversations. I have 4 brothers, and maybe 4 of us were in the Cameron House program. So, and they were in leadership roles too. They were like the chosen too. So I said, God, must have happened to someone else besides myself. So I had these individual conversations with them. So we approached the topic. That was really hard to talk with a sibling about it. That was harder to do than talking to a peer, And so, I got some sharing of abuse, and I think they really appreciated it. It gave us a connection that we had, a deeper emotional connection that we had as siblings, as competitors, growing up. So I think it does make a difference to people who hear the story, even though they choose not to come forward themselves. You can't make a person do something like that. It has to be their own decision. And I still take walks every month with somebody who hasn't come forward, and I don't doubt that he is involved in some of the abuse that happened.
And so why I'm able to sit up here and share my pain and my story is because I went through 10 years of therapy, spilling my guts, and through that process, I knew how important that my story and the truth needs to be heard, and that not every survivor or victim wants to or has the tools to do it. And we have to respect that. So in a part, I'm able to do it because I want to give voice to the voiceless. I want to give voice to myself. I come back to, there can be no healing until the truth is heard. I don't, I've never embraced the word thriver. I know I am a thriver, but really I feel I'm a survivor moving forward. Might be slow, but I'm still moving forward. That's what got me here today.